The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was the state established in 1996 when the Taliban began their rule of Afghanistan and ended with their fall from power in 2001. Even at the peak of their influence, the Taliban did not control the entirety of Afghanistan, as about 10% of the country in the northeast was held by the Northern Alliance. History: the Taliban and its rule arose from the chaos of post-Soviet Afghanistan. It began as an Islamic fundamentalist politico-religious movement composed of madrasa students in southern Afghanistan. Overwhelmingly ethnic Pashtuns, the Taliban blended Pashtun-Wali tribal code with elements of Deobandi Islamic teaching to form an anti-Western and anti-modern Islamic ideology with which it ruled. It began to receive support from neighboring Pakistan as well as from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. In the meantime, countries like the United States and others were watching from a distance and hoping that this new movement would end the Afghan civil war. The Taliban were particularly brutal towards those they considered non-Afghans. Pashtun people comprised the vast majority of the Taliban movement. As the Taliban expanded from their southern and southeastern strongholds, they encountered more resistance due to the fact that their brand of Deobandi Islam incorporated the Pashtun tribal code of Pashtun-Wali and was therefore alien to the other ethnic groups of Afghanistan. The Battles of Mazar-E-Sharif, where Taliban fighters killed between 8,000 to 10,000 Hazaras and Uzbeks in response to 3,000 executed Taliban fighters, is an example of this ethnic tension. Spreading from Kandahar, the Taliban eventually seized Kabul in 1996. By the end of 2000, the Taliban were able to capture 90% of the country, aside from the opposition's strongholds primarily found in the northeast corner of Badakhshan province. The Taliban sought to impose a strict interpretation of Islamic Sharia law and were later implicated as supporters of Mujahideen, most notably by harboring Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda network. During the 5-year history of the Islamic Emirate, much of the population experienced restrictions on their freedom and violations of their human rights. Women were banned from working, and girls were forbidden to attend schools or universities and were requested to observe Purdah and to abstain from obscenities. Those who resisted were punished. Communists were systematically executed and thieves were punished by amputating one of their hands or feet. Meanwhile, the Taliban succeeded in nearly eradicating the majority of the opium production by 2001. Following the Taliban's unappeasing treatment of Afghanistan's Shia minority, Iran stepped up assistance to the Northern Alliance. Relations with the Taliban deteriorated further in 1998 after Taliban forces seized the Iranian consulate in Mazar-E-Sharif and executed Iranian diplomats. Following this incident, Iran threatened to invade Afghanistan by massing up military forces near the Afghan border, but intervention by the United Nations Security Council and the United States prevented the war. The Taliban maintained a military during their period of control. The Taliban army possessed over 400 T-54 55ths and T-62 tanks and more than 200 armored personnel carriers. The Afghan Air Force under the Taliban maintained 5 supersonic MiG-21 and 10 Sukhoi 22 fighter bombers. In 1995, during the 1995 air stun incident, a Taliban fighter plane captured a Russian transport. They also held 6 Mi-8 helicopters, 5 Mi-35s, 5 L-39CS, 6 and 12s, 25 and 26s, a dozen and 24 32s, an IL-18, and a Yakovlev. Their civil air service contained 2 Boeing 727 ABS, a Tu-154, 5 and 24s, and a DHC-6. International relations: only Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates recognized the Taliban government. The state was not recognized in the UN. One reason for lack of international recognition was the Taliban's disregard for human rights and the rule of law as demonstrated by their actions on taking power. One of the first acts of the Taliban upon seizing power was the execution of the former communist president of Afghanistan, Muhammad Najibullah. Before the Taliban had even taken control of Afghanistan's capital, they sent out a squad to arrest Najibullah. As Najibullah was staying in the United Nations compound in Kabul, this was a violation of international law. As a further example, The Taliban regime was also heavily criticized for the murder of Iranian diplomats in Afghanistan in 1998. The Taliban supported the Islamic militants operating in Chechnya and Xinjiang, thus antagonizing Russia and the People's Republic of China simultaneously. In 2013, the Taliban opened an office in Qatar with the goal of beginning talks between themselves, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. There was a conflict after the office raised the white flag of the former Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry saying that the office could be closed if there was not a move forward in peace negotiations. Sanctions. On October 15, 1999, the UN Security Council established a sanctions regime to cover individuals and entities associated with al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden and/or the Taliban. Since the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, the sanctions were applied to individuals and organizations in all parts of the world, also targeting former members of the Taliban government. On January 27, 2010, a United Nations Sanctions Committee removed 5 former senior Taliban officials from this list, in a move favored by Afghan President Karzai. The decision means the 5 will no longer be subject to an international travel ban, assets freeze and arms embargo. The 5 men, all high-ranking members of the Taliban government, Wakil Ahmad Mutawakil, former foreign minister; Fazil Muhammad, former deputy minister of commerce; Shams Safar Manzai, former Taliban foreign affairs press officer; Muhammad Musa Hotak, former deputy minister of planning; Abdul Hakim, former deputy minister of frontier affairs. All had been added to the list in January or February 2001. Mohammed Omar continues to speak in the name of this emirate. See also, Islamic Emirate of Waziristan, History of Afghanistan since 1992, Mullah Kabir, Tariq Aziwal, one spokesperson for the AI. References. External links, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan website, interview with official representatives of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.